My name is Jared Whitwer. I'm with PDI Diesel in St. George, Utah. Today we are going to learn how and explain how to properly install a turbo and a manifold on a 93.5 to 2000 3.5 Caterpillar engine. We'll be using Big Boss turbo and manifold and installation kit during this process. We're going to take the oil pressure line off, and we'll be doing so. We'll be using two different crescent wrenches. There's a fitting and a swivel nut. We'll be holding the fitting while we're turning the swivel nut. Sure, this is all the way off, and you can flex it off to make sure. Then we're going to grab a 9/16 wobbly with a 3/8 drive ratchet. I'm taking off the oil pressure line. There's two bolts and one jam nut that's part of the line that holds it. You'll be reusing these 3/8 bolts. Now we'll be taking off the oil drain tube or a 9/16 wrench on the inside. Sometimes they're extra tight. Sometimes you can wiggle the line just a little bit to get them loose. You'll be reusing these bolts also. Sometimes you can just take and tap on the line a little bit to loosen it up. Helps them bolts come out a little easier. You move the line away from the turbo, and then we'll go to removing the turbo bolts that hold the turbo to the manifold. And we'll be using two 9/16 wrenches to do that. Sometimes these bolts end up actually breaking off, but the new PDI manifold will come with new studs. Sometimes they come off easy, sometimes they strip the head off. It's from the heat, being up and down heat during the engine life. One thing you got to do here is you got to kind of balance the turbo with the front of you, because the weight of the turbo is going to be on this last bolt. As you can see, it's pulling away from the manifold. And now we're going to take the manifold off of the and if you look right here, this turbo is bad, which has a crack right here, which will end up going through your exhaust and ruining your turbo anyways. But this was all started. If you look right here, the center divider is started to be melted away because of the alloy they use in the steel. It's just actually gray iron, where the PDI Big Boss manifold will be using high moly silicon ductile. Also, another failure point on this manifold is on the joint where the manifold is a three-piece, they don't use any type of press fit or any type of seal inside the joint. They use this so-called diaper. It's two clamps and a certain type of material. They really didn't see much success on it because of the heat and the shrink. The clamps would heat up and then they would not shrink back down, so the material would end up leaking out and you would have exhaust leaks here, which results in getting in exhaust into your cab. So as we designed the Big Boss manifold, we designed it with a slip joint that also has an Inconel seal that's actually a serviceable seal, but yet it goes on, the tolerance is correct, and then the seal holds the exhaust from bypassing by. I always start with the first nut that's stud and nut that's on the bottom of this, but unfortunately this one has already fallen out, which is also a downfall that happens on these engines. The studs fall out, the elasticity of the bolt strength is not quite where it should be. We'll move on. Some of these you can impact. And some of them, sometimes you got to use a breaker bar on. And if one wrench don't work, sometimes you've got to use two. And once you break them loose, usually you can get the impact to work. but sometimes it does break the stud off in the head. And this one, with the thermostat housing being on it, you cannot get an air gun on it, so you remove it all the way with a wrench. Always use the box end on it so you can get a decent grip. And that's what happens when they break off. We've got them all broke loose now. We should be able to pull them out with an impact. You want to kind of grab a hold of the manifold as you pull this last stud out, so it don't fall off and hit your toe. Just kind of wiggle it off, and then it's kind of got to come in and fit on the other to pull off there. As you can see, this bolt's broke off in here. There's numerous ways to fix it. Sometimes you can weld a nut on them and get them out. Other times you can use a stud puller. So this is called the exhaust manifold sleeve that goes inside the cylinder head. We're going to slide it out. It comes out like that. And that's also a replaceable part when you change to the Big Boss manifold. We also sell a Big Boss install kit. Well, I recommend using a stud puller on the ones that are broke. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. Sometimes you gotta weld or drill it out and tap it. We're gonna go ahead and give that a shot. We got lucky. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to tap out each hole. This engine was pretty rusty from either being old or being in some type of weather, and the stud and the head adhesing together. So we're going to run a 3/8 tap through it and then clean up the studs before we start cleaning up to install the new manifold. You can see the rust and the old material coming out of it. This will make the installation of the new stud going in, so it won't have a problem. And I suggest this on every hole. Okay, well, we're going to start cleaning up the head. What I like to do is take a rag and put in each port. That way you don't get debris into your cylinder head or into your piston area. We're going to scrape the material off of the head. Before we use a buffer on it. Use the buffer. I use a brown pad on steel. On aluminum, if you're cleaning some type of aluminum, you would use the red pad. Okay, we're gonna put this engine away. We've got it cleaned up and showed you how to disassemble the manifold and the hard parts about it, you know, the stud breaking off, how to remove that, how to remove the headers and get things cleaned up. We're actually going to install a turbo and a manifold back on a new engine that's a pre-99 engine that's one of the crate engines that we sell, that we will show the install on that. And this engine, of course, will be tore down from here and be used as a crate engine as a person orders it. We're actually going to install the new exhaust manifold. We'll show you different components that go in it. We'll start by first installing the exhaust sleeve gaskets, and then we'll install the studs, and I'll show you some points on how we're doing that. This first one's just a little tricky. You got to get it past the exhaust, past the thermostat housing. Just kind of tip it in, then line it up. These next ones are easy. We're going to put the tapered end in. I always put some anti-seize on each end of the stud, and that allows them not to get all rusted up. And if you ever need to remove them at any time, they're not all rusted up, the anti-seize. So you just take that in until it's solid, and put it in here, and thread it in until it goes tight. And then we go to that point. In the kit, there comes a manifold seal kit that goes on each end. In there also, there is 4 steps that you can follow that has this photo card that shows you the different steps of putting the manifold together before you put it on the engine. We're going to install the sill by putting the sill with the lip down, and you can use concrete that's clean, or you can use your toolbox or a workbench. Then you're going to take the end of the exhaust manifold and you're going to push it, and you're going to work it around like that. Make sure there's nothing in it, and then you're just going to take and go all the way around it. As you can see, this will be flush with this. Next step is, once you've got your two end pieces with your sills on them, you're going to put a light piece or light anti-seize around it. This will allow for movement. Okay, we're going to install the end piece. We need a small rubber hammer. You're going to line it up like this. Get it somewhat close so it's centered. And just tap it. Now we're going to install the manifold onto the cylinder head. Kind of got to work it in behind that thermostat housing. And then once you come up to there, your studs will hold it into place. Take it till it's tight, up till where you'll feel it where the studs don't go, or the threads end. Just a quick reminder, there is 11 large spacers and 1 small spacer. The small spacer goes right underneath of where the turbo mount is, and it slides underneath. The rest of them just slide across like this. This end one, you'll have to put the spacer in at the same time you put the stud, so it'll clear. Now that we have the spacers installed, we're going to install the nuts on each one, and then we'll torque them to the proper value. Remember your short one down here. Sometimes in order to get it, you got to pick the manifold up a little bit to get it to start, and then spin it completely on as far as you can with your hands. Now we're going to run these in a little bit with an impact. Okay, now we're going to torque these, and we'll torque them in a certain sequence. We're going to torque them to 40 foot-pounds. We'll start with this one here, then we'll hand tighten this one, and then we'll go here, 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 and here. So as you can see, the impact did not tighten them to the correct amount, so you always need to make sure you torque them with the torque wrench. Unfortunately, underneath you can't reach a torque wrench on it, but you can get a wrench on it. Okay, we're going to install the turbo on the manifold now, which we'll start by putting the manifold bolts. There's 2 different sets of bolts that come with this. If you're going to run our turbo, they're 12mm studs completely through with 12mm nuts. If you're going to run your own factory turbo, it comes with a set of step studs that are 10mm to 12mm, so you can run your factory turbo if you want to have our manifold. They screw into the shoulder just like that. Now we're going to grab the gasket. It's going to slide on like that. It's going to slide up on like that. It's going to take an 18mm wrench to tighten it. And I always do this from one corner to the other. Then I go ahead and go back through and check all 4 to make sure they're tight. Okay, we're going to install the drain tube gasket and bolts. Slide the gasket in here, slide the bolt up and catch the gasket. Okay, we're going to be putting on the oil feed line next, but one thing we need to make sure we do is pre-lube this turbo. You want to spin it a couple of times, both directions, and make sure that that's full. And this will give you a lot longer longevity of your turbo and not have premature bearing failure on the turbo. Down. We're going to start this end first. Okay, your elbow kit comes with an O-ring. The O-ring goes inside this groove. Then after making sure everything's aligned, you want to double check the torque on these. Tighten these up until the turbo is in proper position while spinning the turbo to make sure you're not having any interference. Also double check the one on the hot side also. Just got finished installing this Big Boss turbo and manifold. If there's any questions, look up pdidiesel.com or call 1-800-511-1231 and we'll have the answers for you.